This is apropos. Israelis from across the political spectrum are reacting angrily to the news of an initial deal between the US and Iran, calling it a disaster for Israel and directing their fury at one man, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's insisting that IDF forces will remain in Lebanon as well as Gaza and Syria for as long as necessary, a stance that could scuttle the preliminary deal. A US official said earlier that an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanese territory was not a condition of the pact, as Monty Francis reports.
Israeli airstrikes partially destroyed this building in a suburb of Beirut on Sunday, just hours before Donald Trump announced that the U.S. and Iran had agreed on a framework for a peace deal. The agreement reportedly prohibits further hostilities, including in Lebanon, and experts say that puts Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on a collision course.
If there are attempts by Hezbollah to attack Israel by sending missiles over, then I think we could see a crisis in U.S.-Israeli relations.
On Monday night, Netanyahu acknowledged that he and Trump aren't always on the same page.
Many times we see eye to eye, but there are cases when we see less eye to eye. I'm responsible for Israel's security interests. I stand by them.
Israel's far-right security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said on social media, Israel is not subject to the United States, and we are an independent and sovereign nation. And on Monday, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said that he and Netanyahu were leading a clear policy that states Israeli forces will remain in the territory that Israel has seized in Lebanon indefinitely. The so-called buffer zone in southern Lebanon, now occupied by Israel, covers 570 square kilometers, an area roughly 5 times the size of Paris. Israelis who live near the Lebanese border have little hope the deal being discussed will bring a lasting peace.
I'm highly skeptical that it will really make peace in the Middle East, but let's hope. Better than bombs over Haifa and Tel Aviv.
I don't think the U.S. has ever looked weaker, and that weakens us as well. They sold us out in exchange for a lentil stew, and the feeling is not good.
Amplifying those worries for Israelis, the fact that Iran's nuclear capability is not part of any preliminary deal, but would be subject to future talks.
Well, for more, we're joined now by Middle East analyst Aaron David Miller, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme. Just a few minutes ago, Israel said it had intercepted Hezbollah rockets being fired towards IDF troops in southern Lebanon. So the fighting is continuing on the ground. You said a little earlier that it's possible this deal could end like Gaza, phase 1 and done, as you've put it. Does that suggest you're not overly optimistic about the prospects for peace?
Look, there's no solution to the Lebanon problem because it's a decades-old problem from Israel's perspective, and from the perspective of the Lebanese government that's standing up against Hezbollah, they really don't have the capacity to disarm. So unless you could fix that problem, this conflict is going to continue. Right now, I think, on the cusp of the signing of this deal, Lebanon is going to be an extremely difficult issue to manage. And the rules of engagement, that is to say what's permissible and what isn't, going to be extremely important to define. If you wanted to fix this, at least in the initial stages to get through the 60-day period, you'd have the Iranians constrain Hezbollah, any military activity against Israel, and you'd have Trump constrain Benjamin Netanyahu, not necessarily withdrawing Israeli forces. That's a longer-term issue, particularly in an election year, but no Israeli military activity in southern Lebanon or in the Beirut suburbs, no Hezbollah attacks on Israeli forces in Lebanon and in northern Israel. If you could secure that, and frankly, I think that's about the only way you are going to be able to put Lebanon in the box during a very critical period for this memorandum of understanding.
And in Israel, there's an awful lot of criticism about this deal. Critics of the Prime Minister saying the country is being left behind, vulnerable in a changed region. Would you share that assessment? Has Israel been left even more isolated?
Yeah, I'm not an Israeli and I don't play one on TV or on the radio, but I think as an analyst, I think you'd have to draw a conclusion, despite the impressive tactical achievements on the military side. This has been a strategic disaster. certainly for the state of Israel. All of Benjamin Netanyahu's war aims, diminution of support for proxies, restrictions on ballistic missiles, overthrow of the regime, the weakening of the regime, the fracturing of the regime, none of this has occurred. And to boot, you have a deterrent problem. This brutal authoritarian repressive regime in Tehran has survived the onslaught of the world's most impressive and formidable military, the U.S., married to the region's most impressive military, Israel. So deterrence is now gone. And once you cut this deal and you get into 60 days of no military activity, it's going to be very difficult, no matter what Donald Trump says about going back to war, basically to start this up again. You're going to be edging up against the midterms. I mean, 2 months from now, it's July, it's August, maybe they'll extend the negotiations another month. It's already October. So from Israel's perspective, this doesn't deal with the strategic challenges facing the Israelis.
And has Israel in any way improved its deterrence against Hezbollah, do you believe? Or could, a prolonged presence in Lebanon create new vulnerabilities for it?
I was State Department's INR analyst during the early 80s. This is an ongoing problem. The Israelis have never found, particularly since the emergence of Hezbollah and even before, a solution to the security of their northern border. They tried a security zone, the Southern Lebanese Army, in 1978. Then you had Barak's withdrawal from Lebanon. Then you had the 2006 Hezbollah-Israel war. The reality is there is no military solution to the Hezbollah problem. And like the IRA and the Protestant paramilitaries in Britain, or the FARC in Colombia, or the Acha separatists, how you deal with a non-state actor like Hamas, Hezbollah, the IRA, the Protestant paramilitaries, there's got to be a political ingredient to this. And that means working with and through the governor of Lebanon. I just don't see any solution right now. This is a management problem, if we're lucky.
And does all of this, do you think, perhaps mark the beginning of what might be a more independent Israeli regional strategy? Talk to us a little bit about the leverage that the US still has over Israeli decision-making, given what we've seen over the past few days and even the past few hours.
Look, I worked for administrations, Jimmy Carter to Bush 43, and I'd throw in Obama and Biden. No American president has ever talked about an Israeli prime minister in the way Benjamin Netanyahu has been talked to by Donald Trump. No Israeli prime minister has had profanity-laced conversations by the president leaked. And Trump has enormous leverage because Benjamin Netanyahu, the most important fact in Benjamin Netanyahu's life in 2026 is not Iran. It's elections in October. Trump cannot elect him. But without Trump's aggressive support for Netanyahu, without the inseparable bond being displayed by Trump, arguing for the pardon, basically saying that, as Trump has said, without Netanyahu, there would be no Israel. Without that, a lot of Benjamin Netanyahu's vulnerabilities are going to expand. So if Trump has the leverage, and he may well have to use it, with respect to Lebanon. But again, this is not one-hand clapping. If the Iranians are serious about this memorandum of understanding, they're going to have to constrain Hezbollah, just as Trump is going to have to constrain the Israelis. Otherwise, who knows? We may not even get to Friday without a blow-up.
And do you think, though, that Iran is willing to do that, that it is actually going to stop providing funding and support for Hezbollah?
No. This is their billion-dollar proxy. A lot of people argue, well, the proxies have come home to roost and they failed the Iranians. That's not the way this regime is reading this. They pushed Hezbollah in the wake of the death of Ali Khamenei, of opening up another front. And it's been relatively effective. They are not going to give up on their billion-dollar proxy any more than they're going to give up on pro-Iranian militias in Iraq or Syria and their support for the Houthis. The regime in Tehran, whether they're delusional or not, believes they are winning. They are empowered, they are confident, and they're seeking to create a new political, economic, and security reality. And that is the irony, the cruelest of ironies here. This MOU is going to end up empowering the very regime that the United States and Israel, for that matter, wanted to undermine, if not change.
And, obviously an awful lot of the details here remain uncertain. They haven't been alluded to by either side as of yet. Hopefully we'll get more detail in the next few days. But if the United States and Iran have decided that de-escalation is in their interests, can Israel realistically afford to remain on a war footing here? How much pressure is Netanyahu going to be coming under at home, given that the election is coming up there in just a few months' time?
Very good point. He's navigating a very, very fraught path between wanting to maintain Trump's confidence and support on one hand, and on the other, dealing with the million Israelis, the residents of the northern communities, the cities, the towns, the million of those who feel betrayed, I think, by the fact that Netanyahu launched this war and exposed them to Hezbollah rockets. And it's very extremely popular, this war against Hezbollah. The problem is, this is wash, rinse, and repeat. I hate to trivialize this because lives are at stake. You have 1 million Lebanese displaced. There is no military solution to the problem of Hezbollah, just as there is no military solution to the problem of Hamas, however weakened it is in Gaza. And just as there is no military solution, 40 days of the most intense deployment of American military power, naval assets, missile assets since the second Iraq war, and the Iranian regime has survived. Add Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and you begin to understand how even the greatest power cannot aggrandize or subdue a much smaller one. And that's what you're watching here. Hopefully, President Xi of China will get that message, and it'll give him pause with respect to his pretensions and his strategies toward, at some point, in some way, reunification of Taiwan with the PRC. So again, cautionary tales. When you launch a war of choice, you better have a pretty good sense of your own capacity and do not underestimate the capabilities of your adversary. I'm afraid that's happened here in spades.
David Miller, thanks so much for being with us on the programme. We'll have to leave it there for now. That's Middle East analyst and senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thanks.